Okay, we're live. Welcome to Talking Real Money. My name is David Janey. I'm here tonight with Jess Klein and off camera, or maybe on camera, Wyeth Howard. He'll be working through some of the questions. You'll see on your screen there's a block where you can type in questions, and Wyeth will answer some of them as we go along, and at the end of the formal presentation, through some slides and an overview that Jess and I will do, we'll take your questions from that queue, and we'll answer them live. If there are questions that we're not able to get to, then one of the last slides in the presentation has our contact information, so you can either call or you can email them to us, and our enrollment service advisors will be happy to help you out with answers to any of those questions. Feel free as we go along to snap, with your camera, a shot of any of the screens that you think have information that you're going to want to hold on to. On the other hand, don't feel compelled to, because this presentation will be recorded and posted to the admissions website after we're done, so you can always access it there. Let's see. We're talking about financial aid. We know that some of you may already know something about financial aid, either from friends or if parents, older siblings that have gone to school or not. But you want to bear in mind that even if it was Boston University, things change from one year to the next. If it wasn't Boston University, then things are different somewhat from one university to the other. And of course, your circumstances change from year to year. So if you're talking about something you knew from a prior year or so, things might be different. So hopefully we'll hit upon some things maybe that affirm what you already know, and some things that maybe enlighten areas that you didn't know. But we we're talking about admissions and financial aid, a little bit about admissions, because you're in the entering student frame of mind, and you should know that we work closely with admissions. You may be wondering, okay, I've gotten information about applying for admissions, so when do I apply for financial aid? The answer to that is now. You apply for admissions and financial aid at the same time. Financial aid applications became available October 1. Sometimes people make the unfortunate mistake of thinking that, well, I don't apply for financial aid until I get an admissions decision, and nothing could be further from the truth. In point of fact, if you wait until you get an admissions decision in late March, it will already at that point be several months too late to apply for financial aid. There will be no financial aid money left. So you need to apply, and now is not too early to apply. We'll talk more about the mechanics of how you do that, filling out the CSS profile and the FAFSA application. We'll give you some more detail about that. We'll talk about deadlines. Deadlines will be on some slides coming up, and they're on all of our websites. The most important thing for you to remember about the deadlines, beyond what they are for particular populations and steps in the process, but that at Boston University, our deadlines aren't flexible. So you need to kind of take note of them and know that we don't hold back a certain amount of money for students who might complete their applications a little late. We're pretty much have exhausted our funds or committed our funds when we get right to the deadline. So you want to pay careful attention to it. We know that that's not always the case with all schools, but that is the case with Boston University. So it's like a puzzle, choosing the right school. We know there are a lot of things that you're considering: academics, obviously, the social fit as well. But there is also a financial fit, the best fit for yourself and for your family. And hopefully this process will give you some tips in knowing how to make those pieces come together for you, and know what how to assess what makes sense financially for your family, how to plan that out, so that you're not stepping into a plan or a commitment for 4 years of college that isn't financially feasible. We're very mindful of that. We have tools on our website to help you figure that out for planning for the 4-year span, and we encourage you to use those so that you're stepping forward with confidence. This slide talks about um, feasibility financially, but it states the student loan default rates, which obviously is always a lot of talk in the media and just across conversation about. But we have the national default rate, which is 9.7, and Boston University's default rate, which is 1.4. Obviously, we're pleased with the lower the rate, the better. But the story that this slide is telling is really the answer to the question that a lot of students and parents as well have at this stage of the game, which is if my child goes to Boston University, if I go to Boston University, and like a lot of students, if I take loans to help pay for my education, when I graduate, am I going to be able to pay off those loans? Am I going to be in a position to pay off those loans, or are they going to be a burden to me? And obviously, no one likes to repay money, and scholarships and grants are always more attractive than loans. But what these figures tell us is that Boston University students are successful. They're successful while they're here. When they graduate, they're able to find employment, and they're able to do well, and they're certainly able to repay their loans. If that weren't the case, our default rate wouldn't be as low as it is. So it's a number that we're proud of, and it's probably one of those points of question that, as you're looking at other schools that may be on the list of schools you're considering, you should ask where their default rate is, so that you go down the road of asking those questions. Well, if I go to the school, how well am I going to be able to not only pay back my loans, but live the lifestyle that I'd like to be able to live when I graduate. The sticker price. Boston University is not inexpensive. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see it says, "Don't let the sticker price scare you." We'll go over what the costs are, but the reason for this slide really is to make the point that as you're deciding what schools to apply to, and if you're going down that list and looking at just the sticker price of the school and ruling this one in or this one out, you don't really know enough information to make that judgment at this point. You only know how much any school is going to cost you after you know how much financial aid they're going to give you. So how much of the sticker price are you going to be responsible for paying? And it may be that at the school with the highest sticker price, it may be that that's the most expensive school for you. On the other hand, it may be the least expensive school for you, depending on how much financial aid you get. And we feel good about the financial aid packages that we offer. So we encourage you to apply for admission, to apply for financial aid, despite the sticker price, and go ahead and fall in love with BU. There's a lot to fall in love with, but keep an open mind and be prepared when in April, after you received admissions and financial aid decisions, be prepared to look critically across the schools that you've applied at and at what your net cost will be after financial aid, and make a good financial decision, a good fit financial decision that makes sense for you and your family. But that's the plan we recommend and that you move forward with. So the costs. We lay the cost out here. These are costs for the current year. So the costs for the 21-22 year aren't available yet. So, but these give you a good idea of what to expect. We've broken them into chunks: the build expenses and other expenses. So build expenses are obviously ones the university is going to bill you directly for. And the university bills twice a year, in the summertime for the fall semester and in December for the spring semester. And they are the lion's share of the cost. Build expenses are about 95% of the cost. But we do estimate, and we consider what other expenses we anticipate you're going to need to cover, even though they're out-of-pocket expenses, because we want a comprehensive look at your total expenses as we figure out how much financial aid you're going to need to meet expenses and how much you're going to be eligible for. This is another look at costs, just a pie chart. And again, it illustrates, I think, clearly that tuition itself is the largest piece, but tuition, the room plan, your dormitory charge, your residence charge, and the meal plan make up the largest pieces by far. In this slide, we illustrate on the left the cost of attendance, what we were looking at in the prior two slides: tuition, fees, room, meal plan, estimates for books, supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. The way we calculate eligibility for financial aid is we look at that total cost figure. And then in the middle, you'll see there's EFC, that's expected family contribution. We gather information that you provide us on the financial aid application forms, the CSS profile I mentioned earlier and the FAFSA. And we determine from that information and from need analysis formulas an estimate of how much of that cost your family can absorb over time. So this isn't kind of a look at, well, how much money do they have left at the end of the year, or how much money do they have left at the end of the month after paying bills? But it's really a more comprehensive look of financial strength of the family overall. And, you know, we don't make a judgment about whether that contribution might come from savings in part, or current earnings in part, or borrowing in part, or a combination of those things. But the measure is really just of an overall financial strength. And the difference between the cost and that EFC, expected family contribution, is the demonstrated financial need. And we work with that figure going forward to look at what financial aid eligibility might be. This is another pie chart showing more of that equation: cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals financial need. On the left is the cost of attendance, I'm sorry. And on the right, the split. That may be the way the split falls with you. It may be larger or smaller in either dimension, but that's what we're looking at. As I mentioned, you're not going to know how much financial aid you're actually going to get until the end of March or so. And you may want to know an estimate or a guess or a ballpark idea where you stand eligibility-wise before then. And we understand that, and for that reason, we have two calculators on our website that you can use to kind of crunch those numbers and you know, do some kind of preliminary planning. It's not a financial aid offer, and it's an estimate, which by definition means it's not you know, a guarantee. Why do we have two? Well, they're different. In the first place, the red one, the My Intuition on the top, takes about 5 or 6 minutes to fill out. And it gives you a ballpark idea of what you might receive. The blue one on the bottom, the net price calculator, is a little more detailed. It takes probably more like 20 minutes to a half an hour to complete, and it's probably a little more accurate in most cases. But one of the pluses of the net price calculator on the bottom is that the federal government requires every college and university that offers federal financial aid money, which is almost all of them. They're required to have a net price calculator on their website. So if you look at that application and fill that out, and you're looking at other schools, you know that you'll be able to run that calculation for other schools as well, and compare between the schools on your shortlist. The My Intuition doesn't have every college or university in the country on it, but it has a good number of them. And if you Google My Intuition, you'll go to their website directly, and there'll be a list of the schools that participate in the My Intuition calculator. So you can see if there are schools on your list that that you can run that comparison for too. But both have their strengths, as I pointed out, and we suggest that you use them to play around with the figures and just see where you stand. And particularly good to use if you're considering early decision or early decision two, as they're binding decisions, as it explains on the admissions website, and so you're not giving yourself the opportunity to compare 8 offers between schools. So it might be helpful for you to get an estimate before you make the decision as to whether you want to commit to an early decision or not. Affordable BU. That is Boston University's unique program that offers first-year students. We will meet 100% of the demonstrated financial need. And thinking back to a couple of slides ago with the pie chart and the split, not every school is going to meet your full need just because they've demonstrated your full need. But for first year students at BU that are US citizens or permanent residents that complete the FAFSA and the profile by the deadline and that have demonstrated financial need, we will meet that full need. And meet it with what? It can be a combination of a variety of things: scholarships, grants, student loans, federal work study. It could be 1, 2, 3, or 4, all of those things in concert. Typically it is. If you happen to be eligible for a federal Pell Grant, then the package will not include loans. You'll get automatically a BU university scholarship along with the Pell Grant and maybe work study, and the package will meet your full need as well. Some other numbers on this chart: about 91% of the aid is need-based at BU. So there are merit awards, and on the admissions website you'll see some specific information about terrific merit awards. There are some specific requirements for some of them in terms of when you have to apply and other materials you have to submit to be considered for them. But some you don't have to submit something extra. So check it out on the admissions website. And last slide before I turn it over to Jess is about the BU scholarship assurance. And that simply means that at BU, you're guaranteed to receive in your succeeding years at least as much BU scholarship aid as you received in your first year coming in. So your BU scholarship, BU need-based scholarship aid, BU scholarship aid of any kind can never be decreased while you're here. And point of fact, you fill out the CSS profile your first year coming into BU, and then that's the only time you have to complete it. Following that, for your sophomore, junior, and senior years, you'll fill out the FAFSA every year because federal funds don't come with that guarantee. You have to apply for them each year, and they make those rules. But as far as the BU aid is concerned, it can never be reduced. You complete your profile just once, and you get an amount that is guaranteed to not be reduced. So I will scroll to the next slide and the CSS profile and FAFSA that I've been warning you about, and I'll turn it over to Jess.
Thanks, David. So I'm going to chat a little bit about how to apply for financial aid specifically at BU. So as David's been talking about, we do require both the CSS profile as well as the FAFSA to consider the application complete. So I'll go over each of the applications, what you'll need to fill them out, and then at the end we'll have some time for some questions. Thank you. Sorry. All right. So starting off, we'll talk about the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. As the name implies, it is a free application. You don't have to pay anything to get it. Make sure that you're using, the actual FAFSA application. And this is really going to determine your eligibility for federal and state aid. You're going to be inputting your income and assets if you worked in 2019, as well as your parent income and assets. And the main difference between, the two applications is that if your parents are divorced, you're just going to be entering the income information for the parent you live with primarily. So as we'll talk on the next slide, we'll chat about the CSS profile. It is going to require both biological parents' financial information. So you'll have, the income information for the parent you live with primarily, and then you'll also provide the email for the parent who you don't live with primarily. And then they will submit a separate application, and it just really gives us a more holistic view of the resources available for the student. You'll need the same documentation for both of the applications. So this slide is really just talking about, the other parent's CSS profile. You'll go ahead and fill out the CSS profile, and you're going to include all of the parents, including the step parents as well. And then again, you'll provide the email address for the parent whose household you don't, primarily live with. If that's an issue, or if it's impossible, or if you have any sort of special circumstances regarding your non-custodial parent, we do have a waiver request form available on our website. So you can go ahead and download that form, submit it over to us. We'll take a look at it. If we need any sort of additional documentation or information, we'll be, in contact with you, but that is an option for families. Okay, so what do you need to apply for financial aid? So for the FAFSA, the first thing that you're going to need is the Federal Student Aid ID for both the student as well as the parent. This is going to allow you to electronically sign the FAFSA, so it's really important that you have those available. And then in terms of documentation, you're going to want the 2019 federal tax return, so the 1040 form for both the parent and the student, if the student filed, any 2019 W-2 forms as well. Asset information, so bank statements, investment statements, anything that documents how much you have available in those assets, the household information for the family, so the ages of all the siblings, as well as the social security numbers for both the parents and the student. So this is a bit of a plug to use the IRS data retrieval tool on the FAFSA. This will essentially pull your 2019 income information directly from the IRS into the FAFSA application. And this really just helps our office ensure that the information is as accurate as possible. It helps our office verify the information a little bit better. Something to keep in mind is that the data will be encrypted, so you won't be able to review the income information being pulled in. It'll display almost as if you were filling out a password on a website. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But it is a really great tool. It makes filling out the FAFSA a lot easier, and it will save you some time as well. So including your social security number is one of the more important aspects of the financial aid application process. Without it, we won't be able to link your financial aid applications to your admissions applications, and that can cause a lot of issues, down the line. You can be assured that we take, the utmost security measures regarding social security numbers. So please include those on the applications so that we can, find your application, link it, and review you for financial aid. So now we're going to go over some of the deadlines that David mentioned. These are the deadlines for regular decision. So both the admissions application as well as the aid applications are going to be due January 1st. You'll be notified of the admissions decision as well as the financial aid decision in late March, and then your deposit will be on May 1st. These are the deadlines for early decision. As you can see, it's coming up pretty quickly. So it's going to be November 1st. Again, both the admissions application as well as the CSS profile and FAFSA. We'll notify you December 15th, and then you'll have to make your deposit decision by January 10th. We do have early decision 2 as well. So it does have the same deadline as regular decision. You'll have to indicate that you're applying early decision 2, but again, everything's due on January 1st. You'll just be notified on February 15th and then expected to make that deposit decision in late February. So we're going to talk a little bit about the types of financial aid available. David mentioned, kind of the broad scope of what we offer. So we do have merit-based scholarships. You can read a little bit more about those specific scholarships on our website. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that the admissions deadline for these specific scholarships is going to be December 1st for the trustee as well as the presidential scholarships specifically. And then after merit-based scholarships, the bulk of our financial aid is going to be in the need-based scholarships, again, determined by the FAFSA and the CSS profile. We do include the student loan program through the federal government as part of financial assistance, as well as the federal work-study program. So you'll see those integrated into the financial aid package. Other sources can be coming from outside scholarships as well. A lot of students connect with their guidance counselor or local organizations to explore options there. It's important to let us know if you expect any outside scholarships as well, because we do have to integrate that into your overall award, but we're available to answer, any specific questions that you have about that. Just some friendly tips and reminders. The MyBU portal is really going to be the hub for both admissions as well as financial aid. That's where you're going to see if we've successfully received your FAFSA and CSS profile, if our office is requesting any additional documentation to complete your application. Make sure that you're checking your email, check your spam folders. We'll be emailing students directly if we do need additional information. And really think of the 4-year plan. We see a lot of, students and families think about that first year, and then, sophomore, junior, senior year, it becomes a little bit more of a question. Understand that it's going to be a 4-year journey, to finance BU. So make sure that you're thinking of that when you're reviewing your financial aid award and making those tough decisions. And again, check out all the financing options available, see, the payment plans available, what can you feasibly pay out of pocket? Are you going to be looking into alternative loan options? Make sure that you keep copies of all the documents that you submit. Once a student is admitted and offered an aid application, we do collect copies of the 2019 tax return. So make sure that you have that on hand. It might be helpful to organize all the correspondence with our office into a specific email folder so that you kind of have a history of everything that we've requested. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any sort of special circumstances or if you have a question about the aid applications. I think that's why it's so important to really start these applications sooner rather than later, because it gives you a lot more time to reach out to us, clarify any sort of questions that you have, and then we can, work with you on getting those applications in. So this is a screenshot of the MyBU portal. So you'll see, all the information that's available to you. You'll be able to schedule events, once you're admitted. You'll be able to, again, review any sort of additional documentation that we're requesting, make sure that, our office has everything that we need to fully review your application. Okay, so now we can go ahead and turn to the Q&A. And this is our contact information if we're not able to get to your questions.
Okay. All right, so we don't have too many questions in right now. We did have some questions about outside awards, which you touched on a little bit. Let's see. If anyone has additional questions, feel free to put those in now, and we can answer those in the time we have remaining.
I see there's a question about my intuition. Can I use it only once for all your schools or just get your EFC? I think with the My Intuition, there are only like 6 or 7 questions or something, but you enter them, each time you run it for a particular school. But one thing I didn't mention about the net price calculator is that you can do it without signing into your College Board account, and it'll run for BU. But if you sign in with your College Board account, then it will save that information so that you don't have to retype it in if you want to use it to do another school. And that can save you a lot of hassle. So it may be worth your while to log in. And the information, you know, you're not filing anything. It doesn't go to the school. It doesn't go anywhere. It just resides in your College Board account for you to access and look at.
So we have a couple of questions regarding parents who are separated for filing this FAFSA and the CSS profile. If they should file separately or with the non-custodial profile.
Yeah, so if the parents are separated and they maintain 2 separate households, you would want to go ahead and follow the guidelines for divorced parents on the FAFSA and the CSS forms. The FAFSA defines the custodial parent as the parent who the student either lives with primarily or provides more than half of the financial support. So that's really the guideline that you'd want to use to determine whose information to use on the FAFSA. And then you'd want to use, you know, that parent's information as the custodial parent on the CSS profile as well. And then the other parent would go ahead and fill out the non-custodial parent profile.
Let's see, we have another question regarding federal work study. If a student is awarded federal work study, do they have to accept it? Could they opt to find an off-campus job alternatively?
Yes, they don't have to accept the work study. They can decline it. Whether that's advisable is a whole other larger question that you want to give some careful thought to. We would recommend that you hold on to the work study for sure. One of the advantages of work study job on campus over a job off campus at, you know, a private employer is that you're a student first, and students have schedules and time demands, and your work study job is going to work your hours of work study around your academic commitments first, whereas that's probably not going to be the case with a job off campus. Even if you know, might be making more doing that, it's more to manage for the student to figure that out. Whereas your supervisor in a work study job is a supervisor and a manager, an employee of Boston University, who is first and foremost an educator and understands that you're a student first, and that comes before the job. So that being the case, but you'll get an award notice in March, make a decision in April. I would at least wait on that offer in terms of either declining it until you get into the semester or so and get a better sense of the lay of the land and can make a more informed decision. It's a lot easier to decline it later on than it is to get it back later on, if you follow. So better you should hold on to it and till you know more about what your specific plans are going to be on campus.
Let's see, we have another question regarding sibling information for siblings who will be attending college soon. Do you specifically consider that in awarding aid for the student?
Yes, so the CSS profile is going to ask specific information regarding sibling enrollment in college, if that information is available. So if you have an older sibling that's already enrolled in college, it will ask the type of institution as well as the name of the institution. And then because we award for all 4 years, we do anticipate if a younger sibling is going to be enrolled in school. So that is factored into the initial calculation.
Let's see, here's one. Do you have to apply for merit scholarships every year?
Typically, no. Typically, you're offered a merit scholarship, or if you're offered a merit scholarship, it happens when you're admitted to BU as an entering student. And typically at BU, they are for all 4 years. That may not be an absolute true, but it is generally true.
And then we have another work study related question. If you are awarded work study, are you awarded it in a specific position? Are there choices in that?
So you're just awarded the grant for the year, and then you'll work with our student employment office to find a position. So it's not, you're not offered an initial position with the award, so you will have to apply and find the job. But the student employment office is a great resource for students in navigating, all the different job boards that BU has. They work really closely with students to make sure that they, are in a good fit for their work study job.
And then following up on that, we did have another question, it looks like, about how many hours you can work with work study.
You can work while you're in school up to 20 hours, but most students, particularly first year, work between 8 and 10 hours a week. It's modest. It typically doesn't interfere with a student's academic schedule. In point of fact, research shows, not just at BU, but nationwide, that students who have work study and work a reasonable amount of hours part-time while on campus actually do better academically than students who have no work and don't work at all, which seems counterintuitive, but it is nonetheless true. Another thing about working on campus at BU, that some students don't always get a work study offer included in their award package, and it's important to know that there are ample jobs available on campus through the student employment office also that are paid directly from university departments. So whether you get work study or not, working a part-time job on campus is not a challenge or a difficult thing to accommodate. Student employment places students. In fact, there are more students working on campus that don't have work study than there are students working on campus that do have work study.
Here's another one. How do you qualify for a Pell Grant? Does the FAFSA application submit you for this?
Yeah, so in order to qualify for the federal Pell Grant, you'll have to submit the FAFSA application, and it's based off of the federal guidelines set by the FAFSA. So you'll be notified at the end of your FAFSA submission what your federal expected family contribution is, and then it will let you know if you can expect a federal Pell Grant in your award. So the Pell Grant is based off of, again, just the FAFSA, and it's awarded from the federal government.
All right. Here's one about early decision. For students applying early decision, will they know their financial aid award before committing to BU?
Yes, like regular awards, early decision students get their admissions and financial aid decisions early. Before committing to BU is sort of a funny question, because if you opt to apply through the early decision program, then you're already committing to BU. If that's really unclear, then you should read that section on the admissions website carefully, because that is the guts of what early decision is about. You find out earlier, but on the other side, you commit to BU earlier.
So we have another one for students considering deferring admission for a year. How does financial aid work in that scenario?
So you'd have to reapply for financial aid if you choose to defer your admission. So depending on when your start date is, that's going to guide when we would need the new financial aid application submitted, but it would be a new application.
Let's see. So there is a question asking for just a little bit more clarification on the FAFSA expected family contribution that we mentioned, and how we use that in conjunction with the CSS profile.
I should scroll and find that question because I'm not seeing it in the window I'm looking through.
While you're looking for that, I can also talk a little bit about that. Basically with BU, we use 2 applications. So with the FAFSA, when you complete that, you will see the expected family contribution, but we also use the CSS profile. So when we are reviewing students for aid, we reconcile the data between those 2 applications for kind of the BU need-based aid. So that's kind of how that fits in there.
Here's another one about work study. Do students get paid directly for work study and manage their expenses themselves, or do their earnings go directly to the school? And do they have to file taxes for it? That's a compound question. Get students for work study are paid weekly and based on the hours that they work. So a typical freshman work study award is $2,000 for the year. And if the student works and earns $500, that's all they get. If they earn $2,000, that's all they get. So it's kind of a ceiling that stretches out across the year. And the supervisor will help set up a schedule so that optimally it'll come out that, you know, you get to the end of May and you've earned about all of your money. And let's see, the rest of the question, did I lose it? Is it taxable? It is taxable income. You potentially could pay taxes on it, but then whether it's actually pay taxes on it depends on other variables like how much else have you earned and so forth. And do the earnings go directly to the school? No, the earnings go directly to the student, typically direct deposit, although you could get a check, but typically students sign up for direct deposit and it goes directly to their account. And if you think back to the piece of the presentation early on where I was talking about the cost of attendance and expenses that you're billed directly for from the university, and the other estimated expenses that are kind of out of pocket, that might be books or supplies or transportation locally or personal expenses. Usually students use that money for those kinds of expenses, those, you know, that come up out of pocket, you know, pizza, CVS, that kind of money.
So we have another question here about how does it make a difference for independent students applying for financial aid through BU?
Yeah, so for students who are considered independent, we're still going to require parent income information. So you would go ahead and fill out the CSS profile with the parent income information. It's going to kind of skip all of those questions on the FAFSA, but you'll still be able to fill out that information on the CSS profile. If that's, you know, an issue, or if you have, again, special circumstances that you want our office to consider, go ahead and reach out to us and we can walk you through what additional documentation we would need to move forward without that information, but it is going to be required for independent students.
So we have another one for work study. Do students get paid directly through work study and manage their expenses themselves, or do the earnings go directly to the school, and do they have to file taxes for it?
I think that was the one I just dug out earlier.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I've gotten 2 very different results for financial aid potential tuition using the different calculators, the 2 different calculators. Which calculator should I trust to give me the most accurate estimate? Interesting question. typically the net price calculator, it gathers more data, and usually that is more accurate, but it's hard to know what might be going on in the formulas without seeing what you're entering. But I would suggest you might want to reach out to us, and we can walk you through either of those, particularly if there's a significant difference. They're not going to come out to the penny by any stretch, and you know, they are ballpark estimates. But if they're way off, first I guess I'd check the information you entered again to be sure you're entering it accurately. But if they're still off and the results are that off, then reach out to us, and we'll see if we can walk you through it and get a better understanding as to why. So when any special consideration financially for twins? No, we don't have a twin discount or a sibling discount of any kind. There are probably some things you should be aware of if there are siblings applying in the same year, and one of them is that it may seem redundant to be entering the parent information twice and two different CSS profiles and FAFSAs. But despite how odd that seems, that's what you have to do. Because the application, if you think about it, it is not the parent's application, even though there's an awful lot of parent information on them. It is the student's application. And so each student will need their own FAFSA and their own profile.
Not quite financial aid, but I do see one question about the dining pass and if it has unlimited food. It depends on the specific meal plan that you choose. There is an unlimited option. There is also several other options, one that provides 14 meals per week, and others that provide fewer meals, maybe 120 meals for the semester, but with more flexible dining points to eat at the different restaurants on campus. So you do have a couple of options there if you want unlimited food or not unlimited food.
Food is on people's minds. It is the dinner hour.
It's
I'm seeing a question, even though you don't have early action, does it help to get your application early? So getting your applications in early is always a great idea because it does give our office more time to resolve any issues. If something's not entirely complete, it just gives the family a little bit more leeway in getting those applications in. As long as it's submitted before the priority deadline, you'll get the same consideration, as everyone else. So it's not really like a first come first serve basis. As long as they're submitted, before those deadlines, we'll take a look and we'll be able to review them. But go ahead and get started on the applications, get them in, as soon as you can. And then, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Can financial aid be used for off-campus housing, or do you have to live in BU dorms? Well, totally aside from financial aid, first-year students are required to live in the residence halls. But after you're no longer a first-year student, some students do choose to live off campus in an off-campus apartment, particularly juniors and sophomores. And those costs can be considered. They're basically considered to the same extent of the average cost for living on campus. So if you decide to live in a luxury apartment in downtown Boston, it's not as though we're going to build that into the cost of attendance. We're going to look at your cost of attendance at something comparable to what it would be if you were looking at the cost of living on campus, but your financial aid will still extend in that direction to help cover those costs.
See one here about financial aid decisions. They listed late March. Late March is traditionally when financial aid decisions will be available. All right. Do we have any other questions? We have about 10 minutes left. One person asked if summer work at home can replace work-study earnings. Those are slightly different things. Work-study is a program to pay for a student's employment while attending school. You can certainly work at home over the summer, but that won't be paid by the work-study program or count against your earnings for the work-study program. Or if you're working through a BU department.
Is it likely less expensive to live in the dorms? Boston rent is very expensive. Boston rent can be very expensive. It depends on what you choose and compared to what. And there are different levels of expense associated with the residence halls. Some are more expensive than others, and there are a lot of options in terms of what dining plan goes with what kind of residence, their apartment style, and so forth. So long way of saying maybe. There are students, particularly students who are considering moving off campus, that do so, in their junior or senior year, that are wise to be cautioned that if they make the assumption that they're going to be living so much less expensively off campus, it's not unusual for them to be a little disappointed that they're not saving as much money as they thought they were going to save. But it all depends on how many roommates they have, how far from campus they are, a lot of different variables. So it can be less expensive, it can be more expensive. It kind of depends on the individual circumstance.
Here's one for housing. Is housing guaranteed for 4 years?
Yes.
One
Yeah,
important, sorry, yep.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's required for the first year, but it is guaranteed for all 4 years.
And then one important thing to note about that is if you do choose to move off campus, housing isn't necessarily guaranteed for you to move back on campus if you choose to do that in a subsequent year. So you would want to take that into account when making your decision.
I'm seeing a question about financial aid and study abroad. So as long as the program is run through Boston University, your financial aid will go ahead and transfer over. So it'll go ahead and cleanly transfer over. You won't have to do anything, special with our office. Will be notified that you'll be on an abroad trip. There might be some adjustments that we need to make depending on how expensive the abroad program is, but our office is available to walk through any sort of specific programs that you're interested in, but it does transfer over. And then I'm seeing a follow-up, what about a non-BU abroad program? So because, the scholarships that we offer are from the university, it's only going to transfer over to a study abroad program run through BU. You can, explore non-BU programs, but keep in mind any sort of institutional scholarships that you're offered won't go ahead and transfer over. It has to be through the university.
There is a question from someone who lives in an area where real estate is expensive and lists some figures. It's not really a question we can give an answer to, but what I would do is encourage you to maybe use the net price calculator to play with some of those figures and get a sense as to how much one factor or the other is weighed. But it would be a good situation to use the calculator.
We have one question about freshmen recommending who they'd like to dorm with. Traditionally, you're assigned housing your freshman year, but I do believe if you have someone that you've met ahead of time, you can request to live with them. I would reach out to BU Housing for more information on that. They'll probably have a more specific answer for you. All right, we have about five minutes left. If anyone has any last questions for us. We have one, how much is the deposit for Boston University?
It is $650. Let's see. Do you offer fee waivers for applications in CSS profile? There's kind of a fee waiver built into the CSS profile. If you fill it out, depending on how you answer questions, particularly relative to government benefits, then it determines whether you're eligible for a fee waiver right within the form. So that would be the first option to go to. A fee waiver is necessary for the FAFSA because it is a free application. And for applications, I'm assuming maybe you mean admissions application. And I don't know, you might want to touch base with admissions and ask that question. I don't know whether they grant waivers of the admissions application fee or not. Do either of you know?
I believe it's through the Common App. And I think it's coordinated through your high school guidance counselor. So I would either check in with them or you can reach out to the admissions office as well.
David, do you know if the chat is posted with the recording? Can't remember specifically on that for the questions.
I don't know. Is there a chat or is it just the Q&As?
The Q&A, sorry.
Oh. I don't know. Is it in the settings part? And can I access the settings part? I guess I can, but it doesn't say anything about recording.
The answer to that question is maybe. Right.
Okay.
I don't see any more financial aid questions.
We're scrolling to the end.
Yep.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you all for delaying your dinner with us, depending on where in the country you are, I guess. But if you're on the East Coast, your stomach may be grumbling. But thank you for joining us. And again, if there are questions we didn't get to, or more to the point, if there are questions that occur to you that you wish you had asked that occur to you later, do reach out to us either through email or from giving us a call. Our folks will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much.